My name is Benjamin, and this is the story of a Christmas I will never forget. Every year, my family gathered at my great-grandfather's house to celebrate Christmas. His house was old, with many rooms and a huge basement that always fascinated us. The family was big, and the basement was the perfect place for us kids to escape the adults' watchful eyes and have some fun. Great-grandpa's house had a peculiar charm, with its walls covered in old photos and furniture that creaked at the slightest touch. The living room was the center of attention during Christmas, with the decorated tree and all the adults gathered, chatting and laughing. Meanwhile, we kids could hardly wait to head down to the basement and start playing. My cousins and I had invented a game we called Monster Game. It was simple. One of us would hide in the basement, making scary noises while the others tried to find them. The darkness of the basement, lit only by a dim bulb, created the ideal atmosphere for our spooky game. That Christmas, as soon as the meal ended and the adults started chatting in the living room, we ran to the basement. My cousin Tom suggested we play the Monster Game, and we all eagerly agreed. It was our annual ritual, and we couldn't miss it. We were in the middle of the Monster Game, running and laughing around the basement, when something strange caught our attention. I was hiding behind an old cabinet, waiting to scare my cousins, when I saw a shadow move near the window. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the shadow was there, unmoving. "Hey, did you guys see that?" I asked, stepping out from my hiding spot. My cousins, curious, came closer to the window to see what I was talking about. Outside, in the darkness, we could see a strange figure standing, staring directly at us. The figure didn't move, just watched us. "It must be one of the adults trying to scare us," said Tom, trying to sound brave. We all agreed, laughing nervously. We tried to get back to the game, but the presence of that figure unnerved us. We kept looking at the window, expecting the figure to move or some adult to appear laughing, revealing the prank. But nothing happened. The figure stayed there, silently watching us. We decided to get closer to the window for a better look. As we got closer, the figure took a step back, disappearing into the darkness. We froze, unsure of what to do. "I think we should go upstairs and tell the adults," Tom suggested, his initial bravery now completely gone. We ran up the stairs, our hearts pounding. When we reached the living room, all the adults were there, chatting and laughing. "Mom, Dad, there's someone in the basement," I shouted, interrupting the conversation. The adults stopped talking and looked at us with concern. "What are you talking about, Benjamin?" my mom asked, standing up. "We saw a strange figure outside and now it's in the basement," Tom explained, still breathless. The adults exchanged alarmed glances, and without wasting time, my dad and uncle grabbed flashlights and went down to the basement with us. My mom held us tightly as we descended, trying to calm us down. When we got downstairs, the sight was terrifying. A strange man was sitting in one of the chairs with a disturbing smile on his face. He looked dirty and shabby, his eyes gleaming in a way that sent chills down my spine. My dad and uncle yelled at the man to leave, but he didn't move. Then my uncle noticed something. "Everyone, run," he ordered, and we didn't think twice. We ran up the stairs as fast as we could, panic driving us. Back in the living room, we locked the basement door and called the police. The adults were visibly shaken, trying to understand what was happening. My cousins and I huddled together, too scared to speak. When the police arrived, we were instructed to stay in the living room while the officers went down to the basement to check. The minutes dragged on like hours, until finally the officers came back up with serious expressions. "We found footprints in the snow outside," one of the officers said. "It looks like someone was here recently." The news only heightened our fear. Who was that man, and what did he want? The police continued investigating but found nothing else in the basement except the footprints in the snow. After the police left, our parents tried to reassure us. We decided it was best to sleep together in the living room, with the doors locked and the adults on alert. The experience left a deep mark on us. We never played the Monster Game again, and were always more vigilant of our surroundings. Great-grandpa's house, once a place of fun and adventure, now carried a weight of mystery and fear that never fully disappeared. I've always been afraid of our basement. My name is Cameron, and I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. We lived in an old house with a basement that seemed straight out of a horror movie. My brothers, Andrew and Edward, always teased me about my fear, but I couldn't help it. The basement was dark and damp, with a wooden staircase that creaked with every step. The basement was divided into two parts, an area where we used to play video games and another part that served as the laundry room. The gaming area had an old couch, a small TV, and our video game console. We spent hours there, playing together and laughing at our wins and losses. The laundry room, at the back of the basement, always gave me the creeps. It had a noisy washing machine, some shelves with cleaning supplies, and an old cabinet we never used. Our mom, Sarah, was a busy woman. She managed the house and worked in an office. Even so, she always found time for us. She was the kind of mom who always knew how to calm us down and solve our problems, no matter how trivial they were. Despite my fear, I enjoyed playing video games with my brothers in the basement. I felt safe with them around. But sometimes I had to face my fear alone, especially when my brothers weren't home, and that's exactly what happened that day. I was home alone. My brothers had gone out to play in the street, and my mom was at work. I decided to go down to the basement to play some games and try to forget my fear. I grabbed my video game controller and carefully descended the stairs. When I got down there, I turned on the TV and the console, trying to focus on the game and not the environment around me. I was in the middle of a game when I heard a strange sound coming from the laundry room. It was a low noise, like something had moved. My heart raced. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the sound persisted. I decided to run upstairs and call my mom. "Sarah!" I shouted as I hurried up the stairs, panic evident in my voice. My mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner and quickly came to me. "What's wrong, Cameron?" she asked, concerned. "There's something in the basement." "In the laundry room," I replied, breathless. "I heard strange noises." She frowned but didn't hesitate. She grabbed a flashlight and went down the stairs with me. "Stay here," she said firmly before disappearing into the dark basement. I waited anxiously, hearing only the sound of my own heartbeat. Sarah shone the flashlight in every corner of the laundry room, checking behind the washing machine and inside the old cabinet. She found nothing unusual. After a few minutes, she came back to where I was, her expression calm but with a hint of concern. "Cameron, there's no one down there," she said, trying to reassure me. "It was probably just the house settling or some noise from the plumbing. Nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe her, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. We went back upstairs together, and I tried to convince myself I was safe. Even so, something inside me knew there was more to the story, and the night was just beginning. That night, after dinner, I decided to go down to the basement again to play. I was still a bit scared from what had happened earlier, but the safety of having my mom at home gave me courage. I turned on the TV and the console, trying to focus on the game. A few minutes passed in silence except for the sounds of the game. Then suddenly, I heard a low, raspy voice coming from the laundry room. "Cameron?" It was calling my name. I froze, my heart racing. The voice sounded like a man, and the way he said my name sent chills down my spine. The voice continued, now a bit louder and more insistent. "Cameron, come here." Panic overtook me. I dropped the video game controller and ran for the stairs, climbing as fast as I could. My hands were shaking as I opened the basement door and rushed into the living room. "Mom!" I shouted, my voice trembling. Sarah ran to me, concern etched on her face. "What happened?" "There's someone in the basement." I was almost in tears from fear. "He talked to me." Sarah didn't waste time. She grabbed the phone and called the police, quickly explaining the situation. They said they were on their way and instructed us to wait outside the house. We went out and stood on the sidewalk, waiting anxiously. A few minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived. The officers entered the house, went down to the basement, and began investigating. Sarah and I waited, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, one of the officers came up, his expression serious. "We found someone down there," he said. "Do you know a man named Richard?" The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Sarah, however, turned pale. "Richard, my brother? He was arrested years ago." "Yes," confirmed the officer. "He was hiding in the basement. We need you to come to the station for further questioning." My uncle Richard, a convicted felon estranged from the family, had been hiding in our basement. The revelation was a shock. Sarah and I went to the police station, where we learned that he had escaped from prison and was hiding in our house. The sense of security I had in my own home was completely shattered. In the following days, we made some changes to the house. We locked the basement and installed more locks and security cameras. Richard's presence had left a mark on us that would take a long time to fade. Whenever I think about that night, I get chills. The fear I felt wasn't just about the basement, but about what can be hiding right under our noses. I learned to be more vigilant and to trust my instincts. The basement is still there, but now it's just a locked space, a silent reminder of the danger that once lurked in our home. This is the story of a summer that forever changed the way we played. During the holidays, my family and I would visit my Uncle Joe's house. It was a big, old house, full of rooms and nooks, perfect for our games. The most intriguing part of the house was my Aunt Linda's fashion room. It was full of mannequins dressed in old clothes and accessories, creating an atmosphere that always made us a bit uncomfortable. Uncle Joe's house had long hallways and rooms that seemed to come straight out of a mystery book. The fashion room was especially fascinating, with its mannequins frozen in strange poses, as if they were stuck in time. My Aunt Linda was a fashion designer and used the room to store her creations and get inspiration. The silent presence of the mannequins always gave us chills, but also added to the fun. During our stay, my cousins and I decided to play hide and seek. It was one of our favorite games, and Uncle Joe's big house offered endless hiding possibilities. We gathered in the living room and decided on the basic rules. I was eager to find the best hiding spot, a place where no one would ever find me. "Let's start," shouted my cousin Mike, who was chosen as the seeker. We all ran in different directions, looking for the perfect hiding spot. I chose a far-off corner where few would dare to look. Aunt Linda's fashion room was filled with mannequins in strange poses, dressed in old clothes and stylish hats. Some mannequins were covered with sheets, looking like ghosts frozen in time. The room was cold and silent, with a faint smell of mothballs in the air. I found a large blanket on a shelf and decided to hide under it, next to a group of mannequins. I crouched down and pulled the blanket over me, trying to blend in with the surrounding mannequins. The blanket was heavy and gave me a sense of security, as if I were invisible to the rest of the world. While hiding there, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. I knew my cousins would take a while to find me, and that wait was part of the fun. I tried to control my breathing, listening carefully for any sounds of footsteps or voices that would indicate someone was approaching. The room was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. I felt safe under the blanket, surrounded by the motionless mannequins. Time seemed to pass slowly, and I tried to stay as still as possible, waiting for the moment when my cousins would finally find me. After a while, when the game ended and everyone gathered in the living room, I realized I had left the blanket in the fashion room. I decided to go back and get it, not wanting to leave a mess for Aunt Linda. I climbed the stairs and walked down the dark hallway to the fashion room. When I opened the door, the room seemed even gloomier than before. I turned on the light, and the mannequins stared back at me with their empty expressions. I walked to the corner where I had left the blanket. That's when I noticed something was wrong. The blanket I had used was lying on the floor, but it seemed to have something or someone under it. A chill ran down my spine. Who had moved the blanket? And why did it look like there was a figure underneath it now? Carefully, I approached the blanket and noticed a shape that shouldn't have been there. My heart started to beat faster as I reached out to lift the blanket. When I did, the shape moved. I immediately recoiled, terrified. There was a real person hiding under the blanket. I could only see the outline of a body and hear heavy breathing that wasn't mine. Panic took over me. I ran out of the room without looking back and dashed down the stairs, screaming for the adults. "There's someone in the fashion room," I shouted, interrupting the conversation in the living room. My Uncle Joe and my dad immediately stood up, seeing the terror in my eyes. "What are you saying, Jimmy?" my mom asked, already worried. "There's someone up there, hiding under the blanket," I insisted, my voice trembling. They wasted no time and went to check, while I anxiously waited in the living room with the rest of the family. I ran down the stairs, screaming for the adults. "There's someone in the fashion room." The living room fell silent for a moment as everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at me concerned. My Uncle Joe and my dad stood up immediately. "What did you see, Jimmy?" my dad asked, his voice full of urgency. "There's someone hiding up there under the blanket. It's not one of the mannequins." And I replied, still trying to catch my breath. Without wasting any time, my Uncle Joe grabbed the phone and called the police while my dad and uncle went up the stairs to check. I stayed in the living room with my mom and cousins, all of us silent, waiting for news. The minutes dragged on until we heard the sound of police sirens. 2 officers entered the house, and my Uncle Joe led them to the fashion room. We were instructed to stay in the living room while they investigated. The officers went upstairs, flashlights in hand, and I could hear their voices and footsteps above. The silence that followed seemed endless. Finally, they came back down with serious expressions on their faces. "We didn't find anyone up there," one of the officers said, "but we found footprints in the dust and signs that someone had been there recently." The news confirmed our worst fears. Someone strange had entered the house and hidden in the fashion room. The police continued to investigate, looking for any additional clues, but found nothing more conclusive. The adults were visibly shaken. "We're all going to stay together in the living room tonight," my mom said, trying to calm us. We decided it was safer to sleep together, with the doors locked and the lights on. The experience left a deep mark on us. The sense of security we had at Uncle Joe's house was shattered. We never played hide and seek in the house again. The fashion room, once a place of curiosity and fun, now carried a weight of mystery and fear. As I tried to fall asleep that night, the face of the figure under the blanket and the feeling of being watched continued to haunt me. We knew someone had been there, and that was enough to keep us on constant alert.